Well, King, I'm quite pleased to meet you for the first time. Finally got a chance to sit down and talk. If we could begin with your name, when, and where you were born.
Well, my name is King Doyle, and I've lived all my life in Lowell, Michigan. So,
And what year were you born?
1922.
What was your early schooling like in Lowell?
Well, I went to the old West Ward School, which is now part of the Newell Manufacturing Company. I went then on to the Central Building, which included the 5th grade through the 12th grade. And then after that, I went to JC in Grand Rapids for 2 years, and then I went to University of Michigan.
What, during this period of time, of course, Pearl Harbor happened. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was studying upstairs in our house, and my mother and dad were watching or listening to the radio. We didn't have TV in those days. And they called up and told me about it. And of course, I immediately came down, and we all three of us stood around the radio and listened to the news, and we were shocked and dumbfounded about the whole affair.
What was your reaction personally? I mean, I realize that you were very young at that time, but what was your reaction?
I knew that I would have to go and fight for my country. And as soon as I got out of junior college, I went to the University of Michigan without taking a vacation. And then while at the University of Michigan, I went to Detroit and enlisted in the Navy. And they kept me in a program that allowed me to graduate. And then after I graduated from the U of M, they sent me to Northwestern University in downtown Chicago. And it was a reserve midshipman school. And I was called a 90-day wonder because in 90 days I got a commission. And of course, the people that went through the Naval Academy, they had to go for 4 years to get a commission. So, but it was only during wartime they had the reserve training like that.
Why the Navy?
I just liked the Navy. I thought it was a better way to fight the war, and that's why I enlisted in it.
Well, I bet you questioned that in the Leyte Gulf and Okinawa later on, but that's we'll get to that.
Yeah.
What was the process of actually joining the Navy? Where did you have to go? What was the procedure?
Well, I grabbed a bus from Ann Arbor and went into Detroit and went into the Naval Recruiting Center and signed up, and they gave me a physical exam. I passed it, and they said, "You're in." And then they let me stay in school until I graduated.
What was the reaction of your parents?
I think they were proud that I did that, and they were proud that I was in the Navy. And I remember my mother always had a blue star in the window at our house in Lowell, so indicating that they had a person, a daughter or a son, in the service.
Once you joined, you left home then. You packed up your belongings and left home. Where did you go?
I went to Northwestern.
Okay.
Yeah, for that.
So straight from, okay.
That was from the University of Michigan.
Right.
And from there I went to San Diego and went through anti-submarine warfare, which a destroyer would be searching out submarines. And from there I joined the Hale. And
okay, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here.
All right.
You're from Lowell. You've never traveled outside of the state by this time. Is that correct?
Oh, I think I must have traveled outside of the state, but I can't remember.
But you hadn't been to San Diego, California.
No, I'd never been to San Diego, no. That was beautiful.
So tell us about your arrival in San Diego. What was when you first arrived?
Well, let me tell you how we got there.
Okay.
After midshipman school, I had, I think, 2 or 3 days. I went back to Lowell, and then I got on a train in Grand Rapids, went to Chicago, and got on a train which was the Southern Pacific. And I think that took us 3 days. We went the southern route and then got into L.A., and then they transferred us to another train and went to San Diego. And from there, I went into a barracks, and then we studied.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you arrive in San Diego with a group of guys from where? All over the country, or?
I was the only one from our school that went to, from the midshipman school, I was the only one that went to San Diego.
Okay.
So there were other people that came there, but I did not know any of them at the time.
Okay. So you arrive in San Diego. This is a huge naval base, I take it.
Yes.
Give us an idea visually. What are we seeing when you arrive there?
Ship after ship after ship. And I remember I did go down in a submarine. I had enlisted or volunteered to go in submarine duty, but I ended up in a destroyer. But I did go down in a submarine while we were off the coast of San Diego.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, I'm glad I wasn't there. It was pretty confining. Confining.
Yeah, I especially the ones of that vintage of that year. I couldn't. I certainly couldn't do it. You were put into barracks, and with how many people in the barracks, approximately?
Oh, in the room probably 12, and then
Okay.
they had other rooms where there were more people there.
Bunk beds?
Bunk beds, yeah.
What was your routine like? Your morning back then, when you first arrived, what was your routine like?
Well, they'd get us up probably at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then we'd shave and go have breakfast, and then we went to class, and we were in class until 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
What kind of classes were you studying?
These were trying to tone our ears so that when we would shoot a sonar out, we could tell whether it was a whale or a submarine, and it was real difficult to tell. I'm sure when we were on the ship, we dropped depth charges on a few whales instead of submarines.
Why were you chosen for that particular duty? Did you know?
I don't know why.
Okay.
You know, in the Navy, they told you, is to do or die and not to question why. So they told me to go to San Diego, and that's where I went.
These classes that you were taking during this period of time, after class, you would then go back to the barracks, have dinner. Was there any social life at all?
Not much, no.
All right, so this is very intense training period. Did you start to form any friendships?
None that I can remember.
It just was a very focused
Yeah.
period of time. When did things change? Did you after the classes, did you graduate, or was there some ceremony where they said that you're finished
No,
now?
They put me on a train and sent me to San Diego, or San Francisco, I'm sorry. And from San Francisco, I got on a boat, or a ship, as I should say, and we went to Pearl Harbor, and that's where I caught the hail.
Okay. Did you know you were going to be going on the hail?
Not until I got into San Francisco.
Well, let's get an idea of your arrival in San Francisco. I'm trying to get visually what this is looking like. I'm not San Francisco, the city, but I mean in terms of where you were. So you get off a bus or the train?
They sent me by train from San Diego to San Francisco. And I stayed, most of the other officers who were being shipped to San Francisco stayed at least 3 or 4 days, some of them a week before they caught a ship. And they all had a grand time. I got there on one day thinking that I might have a chance to stay in San Francisco a few days. The next day I got orders to get on this ship, so I only spent one night in San Francisco.
You were an officer at this time.
Right.
What rank were you?
Ensign.
Okay. Now, what is an ensign's job?
Well, he gets most all the duty that the superior officers don't want to do. We had to do the dirty part. In other words, we had to censor all the mail because the other superior officers didn't want to do that. I had to decode all the top secret messages, and because the other ones didn't want to do that. And we were at the low end of the officer rank.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned censoring mail. I know what you're talking about, but for the sake of people who probably have no clue about that, what was that all about?
Every letter that left that ship had to be censored except the captain's. And my mail had to be censored by a superior officer, and that officer's mail had to be censored by someone above him. But when it came to the captain, it didn't have to be censored. So I would censor hundreds of letters.
Learned a lot about the guys on the ship.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
In terms of the censorship itself, was these? I've seen several versions. Some of them were blacked out. Some of them were cut out. What was yours? What would you have to do?
I would send them back to the sailor and tell him that he'd have to write another letter.
Okay.
But most of them did not mention. Their lives were at stake too, you know.
Sure.
And we all wanted to get out of there as fast as we could, and didn't want the enemy to get any information that they shouldn't have. So,
So you're in San Francisco. You're about to board the Hale. This had to be exciting. That had to be an exciting moment. Seeing that big ship.
Yeah. Well, the ship was nothing like a battleship or a cruiser or a carrier. It was 376 feet long and 36 feet wide, and we had 376 sailors aboard, one per foot. Now that is wartime compliment. Peacetime is not that many.
Right, right. Can you remember, I realize it's a long time ago, can you remember the first feelings you had walking on the plank of that together?
Well, I was proud to be on that ship, yes. I was real proud of it.
It was relatively new, too. This was not a beat-up old tanker. This thing was this was practically brand new. It just been brought into existence in '43. So you come on board. Where's the first place you go?
We went from Pearl Harbor to Hollandia, Dutch New Guinea, and that was the staging point for the invasion or re-invasion of the Philippines. And from there we went to Leyte Gulf.
Now let's back up a little bit. What I meant was when you get on the boat, the ship.
Yeah,
let me get this right. I have a Navy friend of mine who would be hitting me upside the head for all that. When you actually got on the ship, I'm not talking about travel time. I mean physically getting on the ship. Where did you go? Did you have quarters?
Oh yes.
Okay.
I shared a stateroom with two other officers, and of course, being the junior officer, I got the top bunk, and you couldn't sit up in it. You had to roll in or roll out of it. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing the Mr. Roberts, that wonderful movie, and there's that you just get this picture of it being the small, cramped quarters. Did you have your own space? Did you have places you could put your personal belongings or books or things like that?
Yeah, a small space.
So what was the routine like on the ship as you were traveling towards Leyte?
Okay, we were on 4 hours on and 4 hours off all the time. And in the 4 hours off, you'd have to write your letters if you wanted to send any home. You had to shave and shower and eat something. And that went on most of the time that I was on the ship, 4 hours on and 4 hours off. And my duty during that period was in the communications center, the CIC, which was right back of the main deck where the captain was.
Describe the communications center for us.
Well, in there we had the radar screen, which is similar to our TV today, and radio communication, and then the signalman who would signal by flags or by using lights. They were just outside the CIC, but they would report back to the CIC. Now,
you're in a convoy, or were you by yourself?
No, we were usually in a convoy.
Approximately how many other?
Well, our squadron had 8 destroyers, but then we would be circling the outside of a flotilla, and the battleships and the cruisers and the carriers were all on the inside, and we were to protect them. In fact, our orders were that if a torpedo was heading towards a battleship, we were to take the torpedo, because we only had 300 and some on our ship, and there were probably 5,000 on a battleship. So, but fortunately, that never happened.
So you were briefed way ahead of time in terms of the strategy. You as an officer were aware of the fact that there might be submarines out there.
Oh, yeah,
there may
absolutely.
be, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you had, in your training, or your earlier training, you had already had a warning in terms of what you might expect. You had some idea what was ahead of you.
Yeah, the sonar equipment was in the communication center too, and there was a sailor that would be sending out the ping, and we were called ping boys. Explain that. What is
well,
this machine, sonar equipment, would shoot out sound, and if it hit something like a submarine, it would come back with a different sound. And you'd have to train your ear to tell what you were hitting. But the whale and the submarine were very similar in sound. So.
This, you had mentioned a little earlier about about your hearing. You had to be very acute in terms of your hearing.
I'm glad that I'm not there now, because I couldn't tell it.
So let's once again, let's try and visualize the trip over. You're 4 hours on, you're 4 hours off. You get up in the morning at 6 o'clock, at 5 o'clock?
Most any time.
Okay.
We would 4 hours, and then it would, say if we started at 8, we were done at 12. and then we were off until 4, and then on from 4 until 8 at night, and then kept right on going.
So that also means 4 hours of sleep.
Right.
And,
and doing your shaving and the shower and doing personal things. And then if a top secret message came in and I were asleep, they'd wake me up, so I'd have to go decode that.
Only in your 20s can you go
Yeah,
through that
that's
sort
right.
of thing, I would imagine. Did you find any difficulty physically yourself that this 4 hours on, 4 hours off?
Oh, I got tired a lot, but no, I got through it. We all did. We all had to do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. How long did the trip take?
Well, to go from Pearl Harbor to Landia, I imagine was a good week or more. Mm-hmm.
So once you arrive in Landia, what happened?
Well, we waited for other ships to show up, and then we took on supplies, ammunition, and food, and so forth. And then when we got the orders from the admiral, we started off for Leyte Gulf.
Did you have any idea what you were up against, what you're going to be up against in Leyte?
No. We were the first major ship into Leyte Gulf. The minesweepers were in ahead of us, but then we took our position and started shelling the beach.
Yeah, let's get into that. What was your specific job?
I was on the flying bridge during general quarters.
That's going to be something that needs to be explained.
Okay, general quarters when we all manned our battleship, our battle stations, and they would come over the loudspeaker systems. Now hear this, general quarters, man your battle stations, and everyone on the ship would go to their battle station. And as I told you, mine was on the flying bridge, right above the communications center, and right behind a 5-inch gun.
Now, let's try and get an idea, once again, visually, of this ship. Were you in the middle, the front part, the back part?
We were probably a third back from the front, 2/3 ahead of the rear.
And it's off to the side or in the center?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah. And that was the area that the kamikazes always would hit if they could, because then they damaged the brains of the ship.
Yeah. So with Leyte, what was your specific job?
To observe what I could and be on the lookout for planes, relay the message, because I wore a speaker and earmuffs or earphones, and relay that to the captain or anyone that needed to have that information. And an interesting thing in the invasion of Leyte, while we were bombarding the beach, our signalman picked up a message coming from shore. And we found out later that it was sent by a mirror, and they were using the light from the sun and flipping a message to our ship. And the message says, "Send a landing party ashore for Colonel Caglione and his party." Well, the captain thought that that was a trick of the Japanese, and he did not want to send a landing party ashore. But he wired the command ship, gave them the message that we got, and we got a reply back, "Send the landing party in." So they had a lifeboat dropped over the side, and several of our sailors went ashore, and they came back, and we had Colonel Caglione, who turned out to be the head of the Filipino guerrillas in the whole Philippine island. And he had, I think, 10 or 15 people with him. So we brought him aboard, and then we went over and delivered him to the command ship. And I remember that we were alongside the command ship, dropped down a rope ladder, and these fellows climbed up. And I can remember Colonel Caglione meeting General MacArthur, and the two of them saluted each other. And that's the closest I ever got to MacArthur, but I did see him. So.
The bombardment of the beach, that's a loud sound,
Yeah.
I imagine. And you're standing out there.
Oh, yeah, that's why I had to have ear plugs on
Sure.
and all that, because right behind the 5-inch gun.
Oh, my gosh. Has that affected your hearing today?
Well, I just had my annual physical, and I did real well on everything except I flunked the hearing test.
Somehow I'm not surprised. Now, let's try and get, once again, I'm trying to visualize this.
Okay.
You have earmuffs on or earphones on.
Yeah.
You've got some kind of a device in your hand to communicate to that goes right to the communications.
Right below me.
And you had mentioned earlier when we were talking before we came onto the stage about a computer. And this was something that I found very unusual. So if you could explain that.
Well, we had a computer that was probably 3 feet wide by about 10 feet long, and there were 6 sailors around it. And the computer had little round turn knobs, and we would give the position of a Japanese airplane, and they'd key that into the computer. And then they would determine the speed of our ship, key that into the computer. They'd key in our course that we were at, the course of the plane, and that's the way they would set the fuses on the shells to try to go off and hit the Japanese plane. Just shipping a shell at a plane is difficult to hit them. You got to have the detonation, the explosion to get the plane, and we would set a fuse hoping that it would go off near the Japanese plane. And that's the way, and in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, we did get a Japanese plane. The plane dropped a bomb at us. Fortunately, he missed, but then we got him.
This fuse you're talking about is a proximity fuse.
Proximity? No, that was not the proximity
Oh, okay.
fuse. The proximity fuses came later.
Later, okay. So what fuses, what are you referring to here?
That was one that, before the shell was put in the gun, they had to set this fuse.
That just amazes me because you see archival film footage of these shooting boom, 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 and it just seems like it's like a one of those shooting galleries where you just pick up a gun and start shooting at it.
Well, these shells were like this, and they had to be handled by a bucket brigade almost.
Okay.
One sailor would hand it to another, and then they'd put it in the gun, and they'd slam the back of it down and hit it, and away it would go.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf is something that's covered extensively in history books. Did you have any idea from your perspective how big this battle was?
No.
So you were focused on your little patch, so to speak. Okay.
Well, we knew there were hundreds of ships in it, but we didn't know. And there were other parts of the Philippines that were damaged by the Japanese also.
Now, while you're out there, you're hearing and you're seeing battle.
Right.
Did you have, was there Japanese fighters flying over?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay,
Well,
they just didn't happen to go at you at that time.
Well, one did dropped a bomb at us.
Right.
And then we got him after he dropped the bomb.
Right. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is...
Well, there were all kinds of planes, Japanese planes coming over it. But we never got any shelling from the shore.
How long was that? Was that one day, or are you talking about 2 days, 3 days, 4 days?
2 or 3 days, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened at night?
Well, we manned our battle stations 24 hours a day.
4 hours on, 4 hours off. Was there any battle at night, or did everything kind of shut down?
It was shut down more at night. The planes couldn't come over, and we were not getting shelled from the shore. So we were more on during the day watching for Japanese planes.
Was there, during the actual Leyte Gulf battle, was there any let up at all, or was it constant?
Oh, just constant.
Okay. Yeah. So as soon as the sun started to show some light, you knew that it's going to start.
Start again, yeah.
It amazes me to think you must have been just on edge, or just there must be some kind of adrenaline or something that kicks in that you realize that you've got to man your station and you've got to be alert because everybody else's lives depend on it.
Yeah.
Was there a sense of control in your mind, or was it confusion? Did you, as you're going through all this, and there's noise and bombs and guns and all that, was there any sense that you were in control of what you're doing because you're focusing on your job, or was there just confusion?
No, we were in control all the time. Yeah.
That's... Even saying it now, that must amaze you. That's so remarkable. The Leyte Gulf once that was over with, did you land somewheres, or did you just go on to another island, or what
No.
happened right after Leyte?
We went back to Alameda, California for some repairs.
Okay.
And then we came back, and after that we went to up in Japan, and that was in, I think, February or March of 45.
Well, in 44, the hail went back to San Francisco.
Well, that's where.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alameda was right in San Francisco
Okay,
Bay.
okay, right, that's right.
So, okay.
Well, let's go back because in addition to Leyte, there was also campaigns in the Philippines, though, right? Were you in Guam at all? Did you go to Guam?
No.
Okay, all right, okay. So I have a note here of Manus, M-A-N-U-S.
It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, that's all right. It's in the Philippines also. And there is a reference to MacArthur coming on board. You already talked about that. Okay, so once that was over with, now you're back in Alameda and you're repairing. Where did you go from there?
We went back somewhere in the Pacific and joined the 3rd Fleet or the 5th Fleet or the 7th Fleet. And we were part of all 3 of them.
Okay.
And I think the Navy did that to confuse the Japanese, thinking we had huge fleets. But there was only a command ship practically for the 3 fleets, and then all the other ships would participate. We'd be part of the 3rd or the 5th or the 7th. And then we went up and bombarded Japan prior to the dropping of the bomb. And we were the first ship to fire on to a air base there, and we hit a radar station. And that, I believe, was in February or March of 45.
Did you go to Ulithi?
We were at Ulithi,
Okay.
Anahuac in Ulithi.
What happened in Ulithi?
Well, we were there for being repaired. We were in a floating dry dock at one time.
The repairs were from.
That was after the Battle of Okinawa.
Okay, so all right. That's where I'm trying to get back
Okay,
to. All right,
okay.
because I know that when you went to Alameda, you had repairs. Okay,
Yeah.
and now you have to be repaired again. So let's
Well-
get back to why you had to get repaired. So this is in the Battle of Okinawa, then.
Yeah, the Battle. This was after we had been up in the campaign that bombarded Japan, and then the Battle of Okinawa started, and I think that was in April, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
April.
Yeah. So what
Well,
happened there?
in this particular deal, we were in formation in this flotilla, and one of the ships in our squadron was the Kid, and there were 8 ships in our squadron, and the Kid had taken a very bad hit from a kamikaze, and we were probably a half a mile away. We were on the starboard side of the Kid, and the Kid was on our port side. And so we got a message from them that their doctor had been wounded and asked us to bring our doctor aboard. So we went over alongside the Kid, and both the ships were going like this. We shot one line across, drew it taut, shot another line across and drew it taut, put our doctor in a bosun's chair, had him halfway between the Kid and our ship, and a kamikaze that came at us. So we pulled our doctor back, and then we started firing on the Japanese plane on our starboard side, and he circled us, and we kept firing with 5-inch guns, and then he came in, and through the grace of God, I'm here today. But just as he went in his final dive, the captain gave the engine crew the order to hit the engines just as hard as they could, and they hit them so hard they took the water right out of the water gauge. And this kamikaze saw that he was going to miss it, so he dropped a bomb. And the bomb split our seams open. The water rushed out, and then rushed in, and the oil rushed out. And so we had to go and be repaired. And we went either to Anahuac or Ulithi, and we were in a floating dry dock alongside of another destroyer, the Hazelwood. And the Hazelwood had taken a terrible hit, and we were right alongside of it. It was horrendous.
So the Kid never got its doctor, huh?
No, it never did. Well, they may have gotten a doctor from someone else, but we never did.
Give us I mean, you just described something that's just incredible. The lines you're talking about are two lines were shot across, and then a chair basically is placed on it, right?
Well, with rollers, like, and then that was on the lower line, and the upper line is where the doctor would grab and pull himself across.
And in the middle of all that, a kamikaze comes along.
At it, yeah.
That guy's got to be courageous. He's got a story, I'm sure. Yeah. That battle that you're referring to, so you've only mentioned one small part of it, but all around you was...
Well, there were hundreds of ships in that.
From your vantage point...
I could see everything because I was on the flying bridge. So.
Give us an idea of, I mean, I realize it's difficult going back that far, but you're standing on the flying bridge. What are we seeing around us?
Well, there were lots of kamikazes and all kinds of flak up in the sky around them. And one thing that occurred in the Battle of Okinawa, this was before we had taken our hit, was that there was a downed American pilot. We hear these stories, you know, about the Americans always being the good guy and the enemy being the bad guy. But in this case, the enemy got this particular pilot, and he was floating in a rubber tube. And we were ordered to go get him. And we broke rank and went out towards him, and then we got orders that there were more planes, and they told us to come back. And I don't know whatever happened to that airman. I just hope that some other ship got him. But that always has stayed in the back of my mind, what happened to that particular pilot.
When you're standing there in your position at your battle station, there's airplanes flying over, American as well as?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got fighter pilots against fighter pilots, Americans and Japanese.
And we have to be careful that we get the right one when we're firing.
That's what I was just about to get into that. I was going to say, my gosh. From your vantage point then, you're not only hearing horrific noises of all kinds, but you're also visually seeing things explode and airplanes going down. And were there any ones in particular that have you seen a kamikaze hit a ship?
Oh, yeah, the kid.
Right, but I mean...
Oh, sure.
Well, give us an idea. What are you seeing? You see
a plane coming down and then crash into the ship, and then all the explosions and everything. And a lot of times, it's not the bomb that's on the kamikaze, but they hit our own bombs that go off, or hit our fuel that explodes and stuff like that.
Which they were deliberately trying to do.
Sure.
In terms of numbers, we talk about dozens of aircraft. We're talking about...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In the Battle of Okinawa, there must have been 600 or 700 ships.
Okay. And then all those aircraft above, and just the sounds and the visuals just must have been incredible.
I think I read somewhere that in the Battle of Okinawa, the U.S. Navy lost 2/3 of all their ships lost during World War II, and 2/3 of their personnel in that battle. There were 34 ships sunk, and 364 were damaged, and that includes the ship I was on. So there's over 400 that were sunk or damaged.
In addition to the battle itself, what were the weather conditions? Was it raining? Was it? What was it?
Usually hotter than all get out.
Okay. So you're standing up there next to this gun, and you've got, are you wearing a uniform? Or
No, we had to wear life preservers. And I think they were the old kind made out of asbestos, maybe. Bulky as all get out. But the poor sailor that was down in the engine room, he didn't have to wear them, but if the ship got hit, he wouldn't get out anyway. So.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you felt a sense of control as you're, even in the face of all this chaos, you felt, but was it hectic? I mean, was your, as you're standing there and you're observing and you're, saying, look out for this or look out for that, it was just constantly had to be on.
Yeah. Well, that was our duty, and that's what we were told to do, and that's what we did.
So, what does the end of a battle sound and feel like? The end of the battle at Okinawa, you're leaving now, but what is the end of it?
Well, the end of it is when we went to this floating dry dock to get repaired.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, here I am visualizing you standing up there, and all this stuff is going on, and the bombs are going off, and kamikazes all over the place. How do you get out of that? Or does it suddenly get quiet, and then you guys leave? I mean, give us an idea of what happened at the end of your particular role, if you will, in that battle.
Okay, well, after the battle was over, we were in the dry dock, and we still had to man the ship, but then we did not go to 4 hours on and 4 hours off. But,
well, King, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, I realized that you left the battle and you went to dry dock. How did you do that? I mean, how did...
we were able to do it on our own power. We were not damaged enough that we were not able to do it.
So the battle ended? It was now quiet?
Or for us, oh yeah, we were. Anahuac was quite a ways away from where we were. It took us several days to get there.
But I guess what I'm trying to get is your ship leaving the battle, or had the battle ended and it's now quiet and you're leaving? No,
the battle was still going on.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is how do you get out of a battle like that?
We just went out and prayed that no kamikaze would hit us, and it didn't, fortunately.
So an order is given by the commander of your ship that says, all right, we're damaged, we've got to get out of here.
No, the order was given by the admiral on the command ship. He told our captain to go back.
Okay.
Now, the captain couldn't relieve himself. He had to have orders from above.
Okay. So now the order comes in. How do you find out you're getting out of there?
Well, I'm right in the communications center. I got all the messages when they came in. Okay. So I knew that when we got the message from the admiral, I saw it.
Okay, good. That's what I'm trying to get at. All right. Okay. So now you then relay the message on, and even though the battle's still going on, the ship now turns around, or how does it get out of that theater?
We just started going towards Anahuac, and the rest of the ships went on and kept fighting.
Okay. Okay. So now you arrive, are placed in dry dock. Where does the crew go when the ship is on dry dock?
We stayed on the ship. We had no other place to go.
What does the dry dock look like?
Well, a dry dock is a great big ship almost, and it held 2 destroyers. And they would open a gate, and we'd go in the dry dock. It was like the locks at Sault Ste. Marie. You'd go in, they'd close it, and then they pump the water out so they could get down and weld our seams together where they were damaged.
Okay. Did you get a chance to take a look at that damage?
I just saw the damage on the Hazelwood, which was next to us, and that was absolutely terrible. I did not see the damage on our ship.
That must have made you start, take a look at that and go, how did you survive that? My gosh.
It was terrible, the charred bodies and all. And finally, it was beginning to stink, and it was terrible.
How long did it take to repair it? Approximately a couple of weeks, or?
Oh yes, maybe a month.
Oh, maybe a month. Okay. And all the while you're on the ship.
Right. Yeah.
But no longer the 4 hours on, 4 hours off.
Yeah.
What were you supplied with at this time enough so that you had food?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay. There was one of the things that we talked about before we started the oral history interview was a particular period where food was a problem.
Yeah.
When was that?
That was in the Philippines.
Okay.
Yeah. We had been at sea for 78 days, and we were running extremely low on food. We only had dehydrated potatoes and rice. We'd have rice for breakfast, dehydrated potatoes for lunch, and rice for dinner, and then the next day we'd alter that. Finally, we saw a large supply ship, and the captain sent a message to them saying, we are desperately low on food. Can you help us out? So we got a message back and saying, we have dehydrated potatoes and rice. So we were no better off.
Once the dry dock, once you're in dry dock, the ship is now repaired. Where did you go from there?
I got a release to go back because while we were in the dry dock, we got a message from the American Red Cross that my father had died. So the captain said, we're going to be tied up here for a long time. I'll give you 30 days to go home. So they put me on a small boat that was going to a landing strip. And the only way that I could find a seat on that little boat, it was from wooden boxes from the Hazelwood. And I remember I sat on a box that said Sullivan Seaman First Class. And I still remember that to this day. And then I went back to Lowell, and then it was right near wheat harvest in June and July. And I requested the Navy give me time off to handle the wheat harvest, and they gave me 90 days off without pay. During that 90 days, the war ended, and I got a telegram in Lowell, Michigan to tell me to report to Great Lakes Naval Station and get out of the Navy, and that's what I did. So I never did go back after we were at the dry dock there.
The trip home, that must have been a very difficult for you. Yeah. Not only coming back to knowledge that your dad was passed away, but after all you've gone through.
Yeah. Well, we got that message that my dad died 30 days after he had died, because a message like that was not priority mail, so it was delayed until they had time to send something like that.
I realize this may be very difficult, and if you don't want to address this, certainly I understand, but what were some of your thoughts as you were coming home?
Well, my mother was an invalid, and I had a younger brother, and I was concerned about them too. And see, I was 23 at the time, I think. My brother was 15, so.
You're the head of the family then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that responsibility had to be weighing on you. Mm-hmm. When you arrived home, I imagine, though, that it must have been a great comfort for your mother that.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And your brother was looking up to you to make.
Oh, sure.
So you brought the harvest in?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what is the process of getting out of the Navy? I mean, you said you had to go somewhere.
I went to Great Lakes Naval Training in Chicago.
And what happened?
I just showed them the telegram I had, and then they processed me out, gave me an honorary discharge from the Navy, and I went home. It didn't take very long, maybe a day.
Wow, that's amazing. There's so much more I want to cover. In fact, I would like to request that we do this interview again at another time. But what thoughts do you have? What memories do you have that stick out from that period that maybe we haven't covered here yet? Are there certain incidents that you can think of? It could be a humorous one. It could be almost anything.
Well, I remember when we were off of Japan in March of '45, and I saw the Franklin get hit. And the Franklin had a sailor from Lowell, Dave Clark, on, and I knew Dave, and I just wondered whatever happened to him, because that ship took a terrible hit. A bomb hit it, and then, of course, that bomb set off an explosion of the bombs on the carrier, plus the high-octane airplane fuel. But Dave survived it, which I found out much later, but that sticks in the back of my mind. And, of course, this downed American pilot that we didn't go after, that is in the back of my mind, too. So.
You have reunions, I understand.
Yes, the ship has reunions. I think they started about 25 years ago. Mm-hmm.
When's the next one?
In September of this year, it's going to be in Boston.
You ever have one here?
Not in Grand Rapids, no. We did have one in Baton Rouge, and it's the kid, which we saw get hit and all, has been restored. Everything is like spanking new, except they have one porthole that you can look in and see the terrible damage that a kamikaze had caused. And alongside the kid, which is in water down there, they've built a museum building. And in that building was the engine of the kamikaze plane that hit the kid. And on the name of that engine is the word Mitsubishi. I go home and we got a Mitsubishi TV and Mitsubishi VCR.
Yeah. Yeah, I make it a point. I don't. I know what you're referring to.
Okay.
One of the things that really amazes me, and I know you're doing your duty. This is something I hear from vets all the time. But when you're standing up there amidst all this chaos, knowing that what you're doing is essential to the survival of the fellow sailors on that ship, were you ever scared?
From the kamikaze, yes. I think we all were. Because we had just seen the kid get hit probably a half an hour before that.
Yeah. Were you ever, this is, I guess, in terms of intelligence, did you know what a kamikaze was before you actually saw one? Were you told that there's going to be airplanes coming at you that are not just going to be shooting and dropping bombs, but they're deliberately going to try and hit you?
Only probably after the invasion of the Philippines. Prior to that time, I don't think there were too many kamikazes. But they were getting desperate at that time. And then the Battle of Okinawa, all hell broke loose.
Yeah. If the bomb had not been dropped, if the invasion of Japan was the way that we were going to take, and finally get Japan to surrender, would you say, in your own opinion, that you would probably not have been discharged and you would have been back in the battle?
Absolutely. And I support the dropping the bomb, because if they hadn't, we would have lost another 1 million people. We already have lost 1 million in World War II. We would have lost 2 million in World War II.
Yeah. How did you rate the Japanese fighters? I mean, the people you were up against. I mean, I know you didn't necessarily see their faces or whatever, but what was your opinion at that time? Were they fanatical, or were they brave, or what would you?
I think they were fanatical. I guess that was their religion. They go to heaven if they committed suicide.
Yeah. I'm not going to cover the period of time after you got back, because Jim is going to be doing an oral history of you, talking about your family and your business. But in terms of the success you've had, and I'll say it's a success, you may not say it is, but I'll say it's a success that you've had, the family that you now have, how much of your experience in the military made you the person that you are today?
It's a tough one for me to think. Well, we were trained as officers, and I remember the captain always told us, make a decision and stick by it, and make a quick decision, which we had to do. And I tried to always do that. Get a decision made and make it fast and stick by it. Another thing that he always told us, every morning when you see an enlisted man, you speak to that man. And I've tried to follow that ever since. And that was good training that the captain gave us.
I imagine then that also is true of your work, the people you work with. And
right.
You learned it from that period of time.
Right.
This is going to be a tough one, too. Your early 20s, a young man from Lowell, you go off to these experiences that you went through. Would it be accurate to say that you were a boy when you went in and a man when you came out?
Well, I didn't think so. I thought I was a man, but I'm sure that was the case.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is the experience had a profound effect.
Absolutely.
On you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, as I said, I'm opening this to make sure that we're going to do this again, because I greatly enjoyed talking with you today. And I think that there's so much more here that we just have not gotten into. And maybe the second time around we'll be able to get to a lot more of those. But King, it's been an honor to meet you, sir. I thank you very much.
Nice meeting you, Frank.
Yes, sir.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.